News on the street is that Anthropic ran its entire marketing team with just one person and the help of Claude for about an entire year. What I discovered is that it comes down to the most basic workflow that we can recreate in just under an hour. The goal of the workflow was to run ads at scale, and teams that have run ads know that the most time-consuming parts are reporting, knowing what works, especially if you have a lot of ad sets and campaigns running, and then turning that into new creative quickly. So rather than going into Figma and replacing every asset with your winning headline, especially if you have a design team that you usually rely on to do this, you can actually do this with a Claude automation. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do this today. It takes less than an hour to set up. So in this workflow, I'll show you how I went from our 3 winning ad variations to 15 more variations in just a matter of seconds using this exact workflow that uses Claude and Figma. So here's what we're building, and it's the same loop that was used by the Anthropic teams. Number 1 is we're going to need a messaging document, a manifesto, anything product marketing that you can use to generate ad headlines using a Claude agent. So number 2, Claude is going to generate those headlines into a Google spreadsheet or a CSV. Number 3, we're going to connect Claude to Figma, and we're actually going to fill existing ad designs with these new headlines. So let's say you already know which ads are winning, your design team made a few variations, you know which ones are winning, you just use those frames or those designs to populate them with the winning headlines or your new headlines that you want to test in your ad campaigns. The whole point of this workflow is basically that you want to be spending time on strategy, looking at new headlines, thinking of which angles or personas you might want to target next, rather than spending time replacing designs or working on designs. I won't show you how to upload the ads into Meta because actually in the original workflow that was also a manual step because you need to log into Meta still and upload those ads. I'll walk you through the entire setup from scratch. Just some things that I expect you to have installed is Claude Code onto your machine, as well as have a Figma account and access to Google Sheets or something of the sort. When I say you can set up this workflow in less than an hour, I'm not lying, but I am assuming that you have some sort of product marketing or messaging guidelines asset that we can use to generate these headlines and angles. So what I use is a combination of messaging guidelines that I share with any external partner. So it's basically a how to talk about Tela document. I won't go into too much detail, but things you want to have listed here are about your company, your worldview, why people use your product versus other solution, etc. Second document I use to create these headlines or have Claude create these headlines for me is our manifesto. So basically a company manifesto telling everyone what we stand for, what direction we're moving into. So these are just 2 comprehensive documents that I recommend you invest some time in. And if you'd like a template, I'm happy to put something together. Just let me know in the comments. All right, so the first technical step in our workflow is that we're actually gonna export these files as Markdown. If you have a file in Notion, you might want to just export it and call it messaging guidelines and manifesto. One tip is that I would save the most updated version of this or a link to this manifesto or messaging guidelines to your Claude MD, just so you could always reference it, especially if you work in marketing. You invest strategically into a piece of product marketing and you can start using it for all kinds of assets, whether it's content or ads or website copy or emails, anything you'd like. Just save it to your Claude MD for future reference, so it can always refer to it. Remember, the better that this document is, the better your output ads will be. So trash in, trash out, and gold in, gold out, I guess. The second thing in this workflow that you're gonna need is designed ad assets. So obviously you can ask Claude to design something in Figma, but that's not the purpose of this tutorial. We're going to assume that you already had your design team or you've already gone into Figma or Canva or something of the sorts and you've created an asset. In our case, these are assets that we've tested and run ads with, and I just picked our winners, our winner designs basically, because when it comes to ads, we know that we don't want to change all variables at once. And if you consider a variable a text headline, as well as a design, maybe even the size of the elements on the design, you want to change one thing at once. So in this case, we're just going to change the copy above a winning design and see which copy does best. So you're going to need your design team or yourself to already have these frames loaded into Figma before this workflow. If you don't know which ads are going to win, just create a new design and we can test those. The third asset you might want to invest in before starting this workflow is to have your winning headlines already into a CSV. You can just export this from Meta and have a CSV file with your winning copy there. I created a document with the copy that I wanted to load into our ads, just to give Claude some sort of direction as well about the length and the tone that I like for ad copy. Basically, it has to be short, snappy, not longer than 17 characters. And we're going to see in our workflow that we're actually going to specify that. The most important thing is that your text actually fits into your design, right? You don't want it to go and overflow over 4 lines, because that would make the design look pretty ugly and not work. Once you have those 3 assets, the meaty part of the workflow basically starts, which is connecting several tools. And the good news is that once you've done this and you've connected to things like Figma's MCP and done all of the Google CLI setup, you're actually going to be able to use this for future workflows as well. So I hope this helps you if you haven't set this up. What we're going to connect is Claude Code to Google Sheets to Figma. Google Sheets needs a bunch of authenticating, and Figma uses a Claude Talk to Figma MCPs. But you'll actually be able to use this plugin for any future design needs in bulk that you'll need. So I hope this helps you set that up once and for all. First up, we're going to need a way for Claude Code to talk to Google's workspace. So this is actually going to let us create new rows in spreadsheets, populate the rows, create text in rows. To do this, we're actually going to use the Google Workspace CLI, which is basically a way for you to talk to Google's workspace and make changes such as create new rows, etc. from your terminal. So there's going to be a set of commands that you can use to just take actions in your Google Workspace. The same is true for slides, Google Docs, etc. Anything you want to do there. All right, so let's set this up. Be sure to properly use the spaces here, because otherwise it can have a hard time. If you'd like, you can also open Claude and it's gonna interpret your commands a bit better, but if you want to be doing this the real way, just use your terminal before opening Claude. Right, so we found these packages and they've added them. Now GWS, or the CLI tool, needs Google Cloud to authenticate it, so we need to install the Google Cloud CLI. So again, a way of talking to Google Cloud or your workspace from your terminal using commands. So here we'll go brew install gas SDK. Nice. All right, so in my case, this was already installed, and in your case, it's going to take, I think, up to 2 minutes to install. And once that's done, we can actually authenticate or log into our Google Cloud. So we're just going to go log in, and this should open a browser. In my case, I'm going to go use Tela for this. All right, so you're now authenticated with the Google Cloud CLI. Woohoo, that was pretty quick. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to connect the GWS to Google, and this part actually has a few steps to it, but I'm going to walk you through each one of them. All right, so back to our terminal, we're going to go GWS auth setup. So here it's asking us what we'd like to log in with this account. So whenever you want to select this, just click enter. And I actually have 2 projects here already, but I'm going to show you, we're going to create a new project so that I can show you from scratch. So I'm just going to call this Tela Demos. All right, so this is the exciting part, and it actually shows you how powerful this tool is, or the CLI tool is, because I can actually see that you can select which APIs to enable. In our case, we want to go with Google Sheets, so you can just use your up and down arrow and then call enter. So just seeing that list there, it should tell you how many workflows you can actually set up using this and then combining with Claude Code. So here we're going to follow the instructions, and we're just going to visit these pages. So when I landed on this, I couldn't see my project. So just for future notice, just know that when you go up there and then look at all of your projects, you can actually see them there in your organization. So I'm just going to open that one, and then we're going to get started. We're going to give it an app name. I'm going to call it Sheets to Figma Ads, whatever. I'm just going to use the email here. We're going to go external for the audience, and then again, use your contact information and agree and create. So it's going to create that. So this is basically like an overview of your APIs, like the connections you have to Google Cloud. Now back to our terminal, and we're going to complete step B, which is create a auth client. I'm going to create the credentials. If you ever run into this screen and you don't see what you're supposed to be seeing, or you're seeing access denied, just make sure that you're on the correct Google Workspace account. So here we're going to create credentials, and we're going to go auth client ID. Application type, we're going to call this a desktop app. All right, so we're going to create that. And here we actually have some secret information. Don't share this with anyone. We're just going to share that in our terminal. So we're just going to copy the client ID and later on the client secret. So here it's actually prompting us to enter the client ID. And then now we're going to copy paste the client secret. All right. And then we're going to go run GWS auth login. Okay, so once again, it's asking us the scopes of our auth login, and we can just go enter. All right, so that setup's complete. We're going to use this link in our browser. I'm going to open that up. So here it actually says, which app you're logging into, let's say. All right, allow, and we may now close this. And if all is well, this was successful. So that's cool. As last step, let's enable the Google Sheets API. So we're going to go Google Cloud Services enable sheets.google API.com. Project is, and now you just need to make sure you find the correct project name. In my case, it's called Tela Demos. All right, so that was done successfully. So we have access to our Google Sheets now. Now for the fun part, we're going to get to experience the Google CLI for the first time. And we're actually going to run a command in our terminal to create a new spreadsheet. All right, so here we go, GWS Sheets. So it tells us where to go. Spreadsheets, create, JSON. I'm going to copy paste this. And I'm going to copy paste this. I can actually show you where to find all of these commands, so you can also easily copy paste them. This is just a test to see if it's going to create a page here. So here we got the spreadsheet URL. So it's actually gone ahead and created a Google spreadsheet. Open that. All right, it's actually called test delete me. So that's actually what we saw when we used that command. We gave it a name. So I'll actually drop a link below to the CLI, the Workspace CLI documentation, so you can know whichever command to run easily. But the good news is that if you use Claude, you're gonna actually be able to talk to it quite literally and say create a spreadsheet or update this spreadsheet. So good news for all of us non-techies out here who don't want to be using commands like this all the time. We're going to connect Claude Code to be able to take actions in Figma, and we're going to do this through an MCP. The MCP is this one, Claude Talk to Figma. So we're just going to go ahead and look at the installation instructions, and we're going to tell Claude to install this. So let's go over here. And let's go back to our terminal, and we're going to go npx Claude Talk to Figma MCP. So that just means that we've installed the packages that we need for the MCP. We're going to go over to Figma, and we're going to go down here to plugins, and we're going to go import from manifest. And here we'll see that we have recently downloaded this. We're going to go down here to src, importantly, over there, and select manifest JSON. Cool. So that's set up the plugin. Let's look at the third step. We're going to configure the MCP for Claude Code so that you can always access the MCP through Claude. So let's open Claude, and we're going to say install MCP using this. So we're just going to copy these instructions. Important that you copy these because I've run into issues before if I just send Claude to look at this page and extract the documentation itself. We're going to restart Claude to see if it was actually set up. We're going to go to our MCP list, and here we can see Claude to Figma is connected. So let's open that, and we can actually see what it can do. Reconnect. Perfect. So we reconnected. Now that we've set up this MCP through Claude, we're going to go back to Figma, and we're going to open this plugin. Copy this, so it's kind of the channel ID where it's going to be able to do work. We're going to go back to Claude, and we're going to copy that there and tell it which channel to connect to, basically. Cool. And we're actually going to run the workflow live. So we're going to go from messaging doc to generating headlines and then feeding those headlines to our Figma design files. You can connect Claude Code to Notion. I think probably some of you already have done this, but I've just downloaded the files in Markdown at the beginning of our workflow. So I'm just going to go read these files that I'm going to drop here. The manifesto and the messaging docs, so we can see that both of those files are here. You could also copy paste the link to Finder. Read these files and summarize the key angles, one-liners, and buyer pain I should use for an ad campaign. So you could skip this step and we can go right ahead to generating the headlines. Yeah, I think it's kind of cool to see what it comes up with before we actually generate the headlines. So here are some angles. Tool sprawl is killing your video output, so people are stitching together Loom, Descript, and any other editors, etc. to make videos, and it's just not feasible. So yeah, here we can see it's generating all of this stuff that I can then use for ads. Let's assume that I'm happy with this. I can actually tell it now to create a Google spreadsheet with these headlines. We're going to feed to Figma. So remember how we set up the Google Workspace CLI? We're actually going to be able to use that to talk quite literally using Claude and make it take actions in Google's workspace. So now that we've switched to using Claude, we need to specify how we'd like it to take certain actions on behalf of us in our browser or in certain apps that we're using. And we want to use the CLI. We don't want to use the Claude Code browser extension because that's just going to be annoying. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new spreadsheet, and we're going to tell it use CLI to create new spreadsheet called March 2026 ad headlines, and then keep the character limit to max 17. So I actually set a max for the character limits because I don't want the text to be too long for my design because that's just going to look ugly. So just check for your design how long the character limit can be, and then use this old spreadsheet for inspiration. So I'm going to download this old spreadsheet for inspo, and then I'm going to give it to Claude. Yeah, let's see how this does. So I've noticed that whenever you talk to Claude and you start to talk to it quite literally, it also means that it can interpret how you'd like certain actions to be done. So it's important that you explain how you'd like it to access certain things. So in this case, using the CLI, just give it permission to do all of that. And here we can see that it's going to start creating a spreadsheet the same way we created the test spreadsheet earlier, if you remember. Cool. So we see here that it has come up with a spreadsheet and it's going to populate it. Honestly, the most annoying part about this whole workflow for me has been making sure that I'm always selecting the right Google Workspace account. There's actually a way to set up dangerously skip so that it stops asking you for permission every time. Nice. So it has outputted this new spreadsheet with all of these headlines here. Nice. So here you can see it came up with all of these headlines, and it kept it below 17 characters, and it actually listed which angle that it's under. So that's super cool. I didn't even have to come up with these headlines myself. And I remember in my agency days how much time I would spend coming up with headlines. So thank you, AI, for automating my job here. Our headlines, we're going to move over to the final and most exciting step of this workflow, which is to populate our Figma designs. Rather than manually entering all of these headlines, we're going to do it using the plugin that we've installed. And you might be thinking 25 headlines, that's not that much to replace. But the whole point of Anthropic's one-person team is that if you're going to start running campaigns at scale and you're going to start running variations of ads on a weekly basis, maybe several designs, and they're kind of all over your Figma design file, this is going to be a really welcome automation, and you're going to be really happy that you set this up. So just as a reminder, these are our headlines. We're going to tell Claude to use the Google Workspace CLI to read, then create 5 variations each of the winning ads in, and we're going to have to tell it which file. I'm just going to give it the link here. So here we're just going to give it the link. It should actually be able to know based on the name, I'm pretty sure, in ad tutorial Figma. I'm just going to give it there. All right, so we're going to say 5 variations each of the winning ads in this file. Let's see how it does. It's having a hard time finding the Google Sheet, so I'm just going to share it with a link. All right, so here it's just saying what it's working with. So it saw winner 1, winner 2, winner 3. And now let me clone each of these 5 times with fresh headline variations. Okay, we can see this happening live. That's so cool. So you see how it's basically taking each winner and creating clones for them. And then later it's going to update the headline for each of them. Yes, so here we can see it's actually changing these headlines live, which is insane because this used to take me so much time. Imagine doing this with hundreds of ads that you're running, and this is just doing this automatically. This is crazy. Okay, that's so much for a wow moment. So here in just seconds, we've created 15 ad variations using headlines that we didn't even have to generate. And this basically summarizes the now viral workflow of the one-person marketing team at Anthropic and what really allowed them to move fast when it came to testing ad creatives. Now we can actually turn this into a skill. Right, so whenever we want, we can use ad variations as a skill to read headline data from Google Sheets, identify the winning one. So this would be if you already have metadata and you've exported a CSV file, let's say. Just make sure that whenever you run those campaigns, you actually use the correct nomenclature for the headlines, and then clone each winner, etc. So let's run Claude again and access that skill, add variation generator. So it'll have all of this context as to what we do in this. So it's asking us to drop all of these things. So Google Sheets URL with the headlines, the Figma URL, the number of variations per winner, so per winning design, and then the channel name, of course, as we just did. So I've put it to the test and I can see how this workflow got a lot of hype because as soon as you see Figma populating these headlines, we did it at a smaller scale, but you just experience a massive wow moment. And again, I'll say that this is really useful for teams that do weekly testing of ads, that run hundreds of ads a week for different angles, different personas and audiences. This is going to be super valuable. So I hope you like this tutorial and I hope you'll use some of the tools we've set up to run other types of workflows. Now, I run marketing here at Tella and I'd really love it if you subscribe to our channel. I talk about video marketing, AI workflows, and all these other things that can help small growth teams automate some of their processes. So I hope to see you soon and thanks for watching.